Navadi Paschatya Shatarni. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavan. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. While the two young men were still rising and preparing to sit, before any preliminary formalities of conversation had begun, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta immediately said to them, "You are educated young men. Why don't you preach Lord Chaitanya's message throughout the whole world?" Abhay could hardly believe that he had what he had just heard. They had not even exchanged views, yet this sadhu was telling them what they should do. Sitting face to face with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Abhay was gathering his wits and trying to gain a comprehensible impression. But this person had already told them to become preachers and go all over the world. Abhay was immediately impressed, but he wasn't going to drop his intelligent skepticism. After all, there were assumptions in what the sadhu had said. Abhay had already announced himself by his dress to be a follower of Gandhi, and he felt the impulse to raise an argument. Yet, as he continued to listen to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speak, he also began to feel won over by the sadhu's strength of conviction. He could sense that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta didn't care for anything but Lord Chaitanya, and that this was what made him great. This was why followers had gathered around him, and why Abhay himself felt drawn, inspired, and humbled and wanted to hear more. But he felt obliged to make an argument, to test the truth. Drawn irresistibly into discussion, Abhay spoke up in answer to the words Srila Bhakti Siddhanta had so tersely spoken in the first seconds of their meeting. Who will hear your Chaitanya's message? Abhay queried. We are a dependent country. First, India must become independent. How can we spread Indian culture if we are under British rule? Abhay had not asked haughtily, just to be provocative, yet his question was clearly a challenge. If he were to take this sadhu's remark to them as a serious one, and there was nothing in Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's demeanor to indicate that he had not been serious, Abhay felt compelled to question how he could propose such a thing while India was still dependent. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta replied in a quiet, deep voice that Krishna consciousness didn't have to wait for a change in Indian politics, nor was it dependent on who ruled. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, that it could not wait. Abhay was struck by his boldness. How could he say such a thing? The whole world of India, beyond this little Ulta Danga rooftop, was in turmoil and seemed to support what Abhay had said. Many famous leaders of Bengal, many saints, even Gandhi himself, men who were educated and spiritually minded, all might very well have asked the same question, challenging this sadhu's relevancy. And yet he was dismissing everything and everyone as if they were of no consequence. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta continued, whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation, but the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement for Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him re establish his eternal relationship with the Supreme. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had articulated these ideas many times before in his writings. There has not been, there will not be such benefactors of the highest merit of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees have been. The offer of other benefits is only a deception. It is rather a great harm, whereas the benefit done by him and his followers is the truest and greatest eternal benefit. This benefit is not for one particular country causing mischief to another, but it benefits the whole universe. The kindness that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has shown to jivas absolves them eternally from all wants, from all inconveniences, and from all the distresses. That kindness does not produce any, and the jivas who have it will not be the victims of the evils of the world. As Abhay listened attentively to the arguments of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he called a Bengali poet who had written that even less advanced civilizations like China and Japan were independent, and yet India labored under political oppression. Abhay knew well the philosophy of nationalism, which stressed that Indian independence had to come first. An oppressed people was a reality. The British slaughter of innocent citizens was a reality, and independence would benefit people. Spiritual life was a luxury that could be afforded only after independence. In the present times, the cause of national liberation from the British was the only relevant spiritual movement. The people's cause was in itself God. Yet, Abhay had been raised a Vaishnava. He appreciated what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was saying. Abhay had already concluded that this was certainly not just another questionable sadhu, and he perceived the truth in what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said. This sadhu wasn't concocting his own philosophy, and he wasn't simply proud or belligerent, even though he spoke in a way that kicked out practically every other philosophy. He was speaking the eternal teachings of the Vedic literature and the sages, and Abhay loved to hear it. Anyone would like to read? Okay, I'll continue.
I can read it.
Sure.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, yes, please read.
Yeah, where did you stop?
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta from the
Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaking sometimes in English and sometimes in Bengali, and sometimes quoting the Sanskrit verses of Bhagavad Gita, spoke of Sri Krishna as the highest Vedic authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna had declared that a person should give up whatever duty he considers religious and surrender unto him, the personality of Godhead. Sarva dharma prajayate mam ekam saranam vraja. And the Srimad Bhagavatam confirmed the same thing. Dharma projito ketavotra prama nirmatsaranam satam. All other form of religion are impure and should be thrown out, and only Bhagavad Dharma, performing one's duties to please the Supreme Lord, should remain. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta presentation was so cogent that anyone who accepted the Shastras would have to accept his conclusion. The people were now faithless, said Bhaktisiddhanta, and therefore they no longer believed that devotional service could remove all anomalies, even on the political scene. He went on to criticize anyone who was ignorant of the soul and yet claimed to be a leader. He even cited names of the contemporary leaders and pointed out their failures. And he emphasized the urgent need to render the highest good to humanity educating people about the eternal souls and the soul's relation to Krishna and devotional service. Abhay had never forgotten the worship of Lord Krishna or his teachings in Bhagavad Gita, and his family had always worshipped Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose mission Bhaktisiddhanta Sarvatis was espousing. As these Gaudiya Math people worship Krishna. He also had worshipped Krishna throughout his life and had never forgotten Krishna. But now he was astounded to hear the Vaishnava philosophy presented so masterfully. Despite his involvement in marriage, college, marriage and the national movement and other affairs, he had never forgotten Krishna. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was now stirring up within him his original Krishna consciousness. And by the words of his spiritual master, not only was he remembering Krishna, but he felt his Krishna consciousness being enhanced 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. What had been spoken, what had been unspoken in Abhay's boyhood, what had been vague in the Jagannath Puri, what he had been distracted from at college, what he had been protected in his father and by his father, now surged forth within Abhay in responsive feelings, and he wanted to keep it. He felt himself defeated, but he liked it. He suddenly realized that he had never before been defeated. But this defeat was not a loss, it was an immense gain.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
I was
Stop here. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa
Kripa
sindhubhyascha
Sindhubheva Patitano
Krishna
Pavanebhyo
Vaishnavabhyo
Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.